welcome to the Law of Positivism podcast. I'm your host, Shireen, and I'm the creator of Law of Positivism. I'm here to help you on your spiritual and healing journey. I am a certified yoga and meditation teacher, a student of Chinese medicine, a doula, a Reiki practitioner, and a passionate, highly sensitive person. I want to use my knowledge to channel information and messages for you to grow on all levels. Hi, and welcome to this week's episode. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you to everyone who's been pre-ordering my book that is released in June of this year. I'm so grateful. It's really a book that helps you on your path with going deeper into practices of the mind, of the emotions, and creating more healing on all levels. So I've been sharing so much that I've learned in this book, Law of Positivism. You can find the link in the show notes if you want to pre-order it. I'm really grateful for everyone who's already done that. And I'm excited about this week's episode. I've been creating more and more episodes around traditional Chinese medicine since I'm studying my very last semester of traditional Chinese medicine, acupuncture. And I'm really happy today to talk to Dr Karchmer, who's an acupuncturist, work with herbal medicine. He has over 20 years of education in TCM, and he's created a beautiful business called DAO Labs, who does herbal formulas for different causes and different types of imbalances. And he began studying traditional Chinese medicine back in the 90s. He has so much experience, and in this episode we talk about healing with Chinese medicine and also herbal medicine, which I haven't really gotten into yet in previous episodes. And we talk about herbs for sleep and issues with the cycle and women's health. So I really love this conversation. If you want to check Dr. Eric out, you can find his links in the show notes as well as to my DAO Labs. And just enjoy today's episode. Let me know how you've just experienced your own path with Chinese medicine. And thank you so much for leaving ratings and reviews on iTunes. And don't forget that you can access my free yoga class on my YouTube channel, Law of Positivism. So thank you for being here. Hi, and welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Shireen. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. How do you stay mindful and present every day?
I'm not always so good at it, but I think one of the great lessons from the pandemic has been that I've learned I can really do it at home. I've started practicing yoga probably 5 or 6 times a week, and I felt like that's been like such a tremendous benefit for my body, for my mind. So that's been one of the like little silver linings of this past year for me.
And that's fantastic. Thank you for sharing that. And I would love for you to introduce yourself to the listeners, who you are and what you do.
Yes. I wear a couple of hats. I am a practitioner of Chinese medicine, and I've had my own clinical practice now for about 20 years. I'm also an academic. I have a PhD in anthropology, and I teach anthropology at a college university here in North Carolina, Appalachian State University. And I have a third hat too, which is I have a small company, Dell Labs, which is how we got connected.
Yeah. That's fantastic. And how did you get into the practice of Chinese medicine?
I sort of fell into it a little bit. It wasn't something I had totally thought out very well beforehand, but it began after college. I went to China and I was a English teacher there. And after a couple of years of teaching English, and I also spent a couple of years in Taiwan as well, learning the language, I just kind of fell in love with um, Chinese culture, Chinese society. It ended up going to graduate school to study anthropology. And still at that time, I think I had an interest in it, but I don't ever think I imagined it was something you could study. Maybe it was, it's a different world then too. It was there was less of it. It was, I wasn't really even aware of programs in the US. But I was very happy with anthropology and began my degree and went back to Beijing to do not a project on Chinese medicine, but on something related. And this was in 1995. And as part of that, started taking a few classes at the Beijing University of Chinese Medicine. And I just kind of fell in love with it. And that led to really a detour in my graduate school. I wouldn't say I dropped it, but I just decided I was going to study Chinese medicine for a while. At that time, it also wasn't that expensive to live in China. So I completed the 5-year undergraduate program that they have, got my degree in Chinese medicine, came back to North Carolina, opened up, which is where I was in graduate school at the time, opened up a clinic and finished up my PhD. And that's sort of what I've been doing then for the last 20 years.
Wow. It's so amazing when we find our path in that way, and that you also followed like your inner what you felt drawn to, because a lot of the times we do things that are maybe just like something that others think are good for us to do, and I can imagine that Chinese medicine it has definitely become more popular the past probably decade, right? So it's nice to see that you practiced so long.
Yes, and you're right. I feel very lucky that I kind of was able to sort of follow some dreams and be open to some unexpected turns. When I was in college, I was sort of a pre-med student, and as your American listeners will know, getting into medical school in the U.S. is very challenging. It requires a lot of hard work, and I just sort of burnt out on that process. And in fact, the reason I went to China initially was to get away from medical school. I was like, I just can't. That's not a career I was ready for or wanted to follow. And so it's kind of interesting that I came back to medicine, but back to a traditional medicine, to about 10 years later, and was able to kind of fall in love with it. I think maybe in a way that I never could have when I was kind of just coming out of college.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Thank you for sharing your story. And something that you're really working with DAO Labs when we think about, most people, when they think about Chinese medicine, they might immediately think about acupuncture, but it's so much more. It's so holistic, and it has so many modalities in it, because there's not just one way to heal your body. So I'm really interested in the branch of herbal medicine, and how have you seen that the herbal medicine has helped you in your practice to help others?
Well, that's such a great question. And you're right. I think in the West, we tend to know acupuncture first and not herbal medicine. And that was true for me when I went to China back in the mid 90s. And one of the big surprises for me was when I first started taking classes at the Beijing University of Chinese Medicine, was that it was very clear that the most important thing in Chinese medicine was not acupuncture in China, but it was really herbal medicine. And I had initially thought maybe, and I knew there was, you could kind of, at that time, they may have changed it, but at that time you could kind of choose. You could kind of be in sort of an herbal medicine track, or you could be in an acupuncture and massage track. And I initially kind of started off maybe leaning towards the latter. I thought acupuncture massage would be more interesting, but it just sort of was very clear that the best professors, the best students were all doing herbal medicine. So it seemed like something important was going on there. It seemed like that's where like all the, at least at that time, I don't want to dismiss acupuncture, but like the intellectual energy, at least, at that moment, and was really kind of on the herbal medicine side of things. And so I ended up just following that track. And it's kind of been amazing. One of the things I've loved about it is that it certainly opened me up to sort of the plant world, but not just plants, but animals and minerals around you. And you really have to start to think about how, those things can be used as medicines, how they're part of our environment, and how they react and relate to us, and how they can be used and can to transform us or heal us. And I found it just fascinating. So it's really opened up some real kind of intellectual terrain for me to just like think about the world. So it's been wonderful.
Yeah, it's probably, I mean, it is the oldest type of like medicine, because before like the medicine that we have today, there was only herbs and plants that we used. So it really makes sense that they can have a powerful impact on us. And also I don't see that they like plants are very different from us. There is like, we're so much integrated. Like when we say that we're one with everything, it feels like
Mm-hmm.
like our body is so integrated. I just wrote a paper on the Chinese medicine perspective of melatonin, which helps us to balance our circadian rhythm. And interesting paper that I came across was that, so melatonin is not only available in the human body, it's also in animals and in plants. And it would be interesting to, and it was mentioned in this paper, in the article, this research article, that it's also like, how does that affect us? Because we're also using the plant and taking in that it's circadian regulating melatonin. So it's really interesting. I mean, there are plants that can help us sleep more, and there's plants that helps us energize. So it's so interconnected that it makes so much sense that it can help us to boost our health. So I just think that it's something that has been forgotten in our society.
I think that's really a beautiful way to think about it. And I agree. In fact, if we take the example of sleep, the Chinese medicine perspective on sleep is so interesting, and I found it to be so potentially helpful and transformative. I think we're used to when we struggle with sleep, just sort of sedating our bodies to try to get us to sleep better. And often with chronic insomnia in Chinese medicine, we want to build up our bodies, and so the perspective is almost the opposite: is how to like strengthen our bodies so that we can sleep more soundly and more fully. And things like, for example, in Chinese medicine, things like ginseng, but of course it's going to often be in combination. But like something like ginseng, which I think probably your listeners are all familiar with, would be like a key ingredient in a number of formulas to help like people sleep better. So it's almost the opposite of what we think. Instead of giving us, it would also give us energy, but then it would also allow us to sleep. So it's just that's, I think, just one small example of how learning about the plant world can also, I think, like transform the way we start thinking about our bodies and our health. And
Mm.
It's really fascinating.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
And in my in the study that I did was actually to it was so interesting that the whole when I translated melatonin into TCM, it really came down to yin and yang balance, like how to balance night and day and awake state. And it's there actually hasn't been that much proof that external melatonin really exogenous melatonin is great to just take. So from my perspective, it was actually better to start balancing the body from within and help regulate through balancing yin and yang, because it's usually when we see like I wrote a lot about the heart connected to the sleep, for example. And now that I'm also out in um, internshipping at hospitals, seeing patients that have mental and emotional illness, I can see the heart, all of these traits that I'm learning in Chinese medicine, that sleep is always affected. What I've seen so far from these weeks I've been there, and also all of these classical symptoms of, like, you know, the skin, either it can be dry or redness. It's so fascinating. So I'm really interested in how you have worked with these different patterns to create these herbs that you're creating in DAO Labs.
Well, I think I love that you mentioned the heart, and we do have a as you may know, we do have a couple formulas for insomnia that we sell at Dell Labs, and but the heart is one of the key elements of it. And so thinking about different plants and herbal medicines that affect the heart is absolutely essential in treating insomnia. And what's neat about that is the heart, in some sense, takes the place of the brain. So instead of like in Western medicine, say we're going to sedate the brain to help us calm down and sleep, the approach in Chinese medicine is really to treat the heart, to help settle the spirit in the heart. And what I kind of love about that is that it really helps to kind of erase this divide between the mind and the body that's been so, important and influential sort of in the history of like Western thought. And instead it puts consciousness like back in the body. So our problems with sleep aren't about our brains, they're really about our bodies. And that's also true in Chinese medicine, really for the emotions, and even for deeper problems, for example, such as epilepsy. I have a son with epilepsy who's been really helped by Chinese herbal medicine. So treating the heart is absolutely essential in dealing with anything that has to do with conscious, what we'd probably call consciousness in the West. But in Chinese medicine, it's about settling the spirit. And what's great about it is that there are plants, that historically and the doctors of Chinese medicine know that these help treat the heart. They help to drain heat from the heart, or they help to supplement it if it's weak and things like that. And so when you put those problems back into the body, then it becomes in some ways much easier to treat it with things like various plants and herbs.
Yeah, I love that. And I love the connection between everything, and that it's all about balancing, not trying to put in something extra. It's more creating inner balance, right?
Absolutely. That's such a key concept. And so it's not about, and this is why I think, to get back to your point about melatonin, and I found this with my clinic, I think the exogenous melatonin, it helps some people, but it seems like I have lots of patients who seem like it hasn't helped them at all. And it might work in certain situations, but the goal in Chinese medicine is always kind of balance, and also helping your body to regain that balance if you've lost it. And so that's where, and certainly when you're not sleeping well and you're having insomnia, you've definitely lost it in some capacity. So often what happens with the herbs, and I think maybe an important part of it too, is that you generally you aren't giving just one herb. I think we have a misconception here at least in the US, people often like to go to health food stores and buy, adaptogens and things like that. But part of what makes, I think, Chinese herbal medicine so powerful is that it often is herbs that are in combination. So you have this very kind of complex and well-balanced blend of things where certain characteristics are enhanced and others are, and any side effects are hopefully balanced out. And that's what kind of helps to get your body back, helps to rebalance your body so that if ultimately you take away the herbs and you're kind of there, you're back to where your body needs to be, as opposed to sort of always being reliant on Ambien or whatever, or Klonopin or whatever drug you're taking to kind of like get you through the night. And those drugs will never, those drugs will rarely kind of, you just become dependent on them, right? They rarely kind of help you get back to that point of balance.
Yeah, because they don't go to the root cause of what's wrong. They just treat the symptom.
That's right. I think they just treat the symptom, and they kind of stick with the sleep example, and they're kind of, again, seeing the symptom to be this thing in your brain, some sort of disruption in your brain. And so they've separated the brain from the body in a sense. They aren't thinking about sort of, they haven't taken it from this more holistic perspective. Yeah. So I think the plants in herbal medicine, I think that's what I've kind of learned, over the years. I think it takes you a while to get there, I think, in your practice. But what I love about the plants is that it is kind of this. It is a holism, not only for like thinking about how you treat the patient, but also just, again, connecting human beings with like the environment around us, and helping us kind of think in the most holistic way possible about like having a balance not only within our bodies but with nature itself.
Yeah, definitely. And what I love about your products is how simple it is, because it can feel overwhelming with all of these herbs and everything and how to prepare them, because traditionally it's really like it takes a lot of preparation and all of this, but yours is in a sachet, and then you can make a tea out of it, right?
That's right. So at Dell Labs, one thing we've tried to do is, there is a lot of, as any student of knows, there is a lot of complexity to Chinese herbal medicine. And so we've tried to kind of, our goal is to make it as approachable and as simple as possible. And so we've done things like we put the formulas in little individual sachets, so you can, or a little individual pouch, you can have your daily dose, or you can take it with you if you need to. And so we've tried to kind of make it a little bit more convenient to use formulas that we find kind of generally really widely applicable to like lots and lots of patients and consumers, and to just try to make it a little bit easy, a little bit easier, a little bit more approachable. And ultimately, I think, and this is what I think your podcast is about in a certain way too, is just to kind of like help people start to change the conversation, to rethink their health, and to kind of get a new language for maybe thinking about their health. So we feel like it's all part of this grander project to put us on a better path towards wellness and just overall health.
Yeah. And I'm really interested, because we also focus on women's health a lot in this podcast, and I'm thinking about the imbalances that women are experiencing in their cycles. We live in a very stressful life. We maybe are not eating exactly how our body needs. And how can one work with herbal medicine with balancing this? Like, what is the foundation, the knowledge around this topic, because it's such a crucial and vital part of our health, but it's not taken into consideration when we have issues. It's in Western medicine, it's just something that doctors don't ask about this, but in Chinese medicine we ask how our patients like, how are the cycles, the flow, everything. So how have you been working with that?
I think women's health and gynecology is also another great example of some of the unique perspectives of Chinese medicine and some of the real advantages. But if we think about a lot of Western medicine approaches to women's health, it's so much of it is really hormonal treatments. It's the pill. It's these incredibly powerful drugs that can totally sort of take over a woman's natural hormonal cycles and control and control your period or your gynecological health in those ways. But in Chinese medicine, the approach is almost the exact opposite. You are always using, the acupuncture is a good modality here too, but herbal medicine is wonderful too. And everything you use in herbal medicine is much more gentle, but the ultimate goal, and this was sort of the first lesson, or maybe the key lesson I always remember from my courses, and I've seen it so much in my practice, is that is this idea of like regulation. Like it's essential to regulate the cycle. And so by regulating it, and by that meaning having it occur on a very regular basis, but also having moderate blood flow, not too little, not too heavy, a good color, not too bright, not too dark, not too much clotting, not too much pain. So really sort of eliminating all the symptoms. Those are the approaches in Chinese medicine that are sort of most important. So again, it often requires tinkering with a kind of herbal prescription, trying to get it just right for the patient. But usually you can have, but if you do, you can often have amazing results. Sometimes women who have struggled with infertility for years, they suddenly get pregnant. Women who have had horribly painful periods for years, suddenly they start happening without much pain or any at all. And so yeah, that approach of like regulation, sort of gentle modulations that really get at the root of the problem. And sometimes also, I mean, I think what's significant too is it's not necessarily just too important to rely on the herbs, but it's also like diet and just like your own sort of personal self-care can be incredibly important too. And you would certainly see that in China. Many women, even if they aren't like they may have very little training in Chinese medicine, but they'll be quite cautious around the time of their period. They'll avoid foods that are thought to be cold. It might like increase like pain during menstruation. And so you sort of see kind of awareness that women will have in China that I think is just not quite as strong, at least in the US, and I think just maybe in Europe as well. So it's a very powerful approach.
Yeah, and the unique thing also, I think, so usually I spoke about this again in my paper, that usually when you have, for example, you have insomnia,